Hi, I'm Josh Rushing, filling in for Lisa Fletcher, and you are in the stream. Today, a rising number of U.S. children are being given study drugs to boost their academic performance. We look at whether attention deficit disorder drugs are being overprescribed. Writer and blogger Anushay Hossain is our digital producer today. You can follow her personal blog at anushayspoint.com. She'll bring in your live feedback to the conversation, so make sure you tweet her using the hashtag AJStream. Anushay, I know I've been getting a lot of response on my own personal Twitter about this. What's the AJ Stream community been saying? Josh,
our online community has a lot to say about this issue, and from what I've been seeing, there's a general concern about the side effects that people might not know about. A lot of people are saying that if you don't even have ADD or ADHD or other conditions, you should not be using any of these drugs. I have a video comment from our online community. Let's take a listen. Let me just pull it up for you 1 second.
Adderall is for people with ADD, and it's not a performance-enhancing supplement for kids with bad grades. Low-income children who need extra help should be given government-funded free tutoring, not medicine for an illness they are not diagnosed with. And it's problematic to give these drugs to students who don't have ADD because it trivializes a real medical condition which many people really do suffer from.
Of course, I'm going to try to bring in as many of your tweets and comments throughout the show, so join us on stream.aljazeera.com or tweet me using the hashtag AJStream.
And to Anushay's left is Dr. William Graff, professor of pediatrics and neurology at Yale School of Medicine. For the last 20 years, Dr. Graff has focused on diagnostic approaches to complex neurodevelopment disorders and medical care for families with children who have them. Dr. Graff, welcome to the stream.
Thanks,
I look forward to hearing your opinion on this.
Thank you.
And to give us some personal perspectives, 4 more guests are joining us in the Google Plus Hangout. I'm glad you guys are here today. We look forward to hearing from each of you what you have to say about the topic. Now, one of the cool things about this stream is that you can be in future Hangouts. All you have to do is add us to your circles at the link below and keep an eye out for future shows that may interest you.
Hello everyone, my name is Pablo, 24 years old from Spain, currently unemployed kid, and I'm in the stream.
The United States is nearly 5% of the world's population, but produces an 88% of the world's legal amphetamines. Now, these are prescription drugs like Adderall and Ritalin, which treat attention deficit or hyperactivity disorders like ADHD. And according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, better known as the CDC, the number of children between the ages of 5 and 17 reported by their parents to have ADHD rose from 7 to 9% between 1998 and 2009. That's more than 5 million U.S. children who may be taking some form of amphetamines. And while these drugs are effective in treating kids and adults with these conditions, many are concerned that the pills are ending up in the hands of individuals or families who are simply looking for a boost in academic performance. It's become common on college and university campuses. Take a look at this clip from the Adderall generation.
It's really just a desire to be able to work for long periods of time and enjoy all the work that you're doing while you're doing it.
It helps me focus on my homework and get things done faster.
It does take away from the stress of having to do a lot of work. It's no longer stressful. You don't mind it as much.
It helped me get better grades. Like if I didn't have Adderall, totally fail college. Not even joking.
I buy it from friends. I'm not prescribed to it.
But it's not just college students that are a part of this Adderall generation. The same research from the CDC found that ADHD prevalence was higher among children of low-income families during the same 10-year period. Some fear that parents eager to see their kids succeed are turning to these drugs without knowing if they have long-term side effects. So whether it's children of low-income families or college students competing for academic excellence, are these drugs being loosely administered? Or is it an issue of a broken system? Now, I'd like to turn first to Dr. Graff. Tell me this, we've seen reports, New York Times recently did an article, I tweeted it out yesterday for our community, that interviewed a doctor that is not only prescribing these drugs more for kids who are diagnosed with ADHD, but also prescribing it for kids who may not have ADHD but aren't fitting into the school system. Have you seen a rise in not only the diagnosis of children with ADHD, but also a rise beyond that in prescribing these types of drugs for other children?
Josh, I don't think I'm seeing them in my own practice, but I think we're talking about different groups. We're talking about true ADHD, and we can define that, how it's defined. We're talking about people that don't have ADHD or are taking it. in a way that's called non-medical use. And then we have this in-between group with people who have a couple of symptoms. They're milder symptoms. This is a zone of ambiguity, some people call it, where the diagnostic threshold might be a little bit lower to make the diagnosis.
Well,
that
the
might
description
explain
of ADHD is vague enough that it creates a pretty big gray area group in my estimation, yeah?
That's absolutely right. Different parents and different teachers and physicians will see symptoms differently. One major important part of the disorder diagnosis, remember the D stands for disorder, is that people are not able to function, what they call functional impairment, which means people really can't get through their day. So it's affecting their life quality and their ability. Other people have these symptoms, but they really can get through their day, and people want to just sort of deal with it and live with it. Remember, not all kids who have the diagnosis of ADHD actually get medications, maybe only about 60%.
But it seems like the get through their day part is a big variable here that could change. And what I mean is, let's say you have kid A, and he's in a very liberal environment, unstructured day. Kid B, who's in a very structured environment. Kid A is doing well, kid B isn't. Kid B gets the prescription, right? But you switch those two kids, and it could be kid A that gets the prescription in the structured environment. It seems like if the environment is part of one of the variables, are you really prescribing it for the child, or are you prescribing it for the dynamic between the kid and his environment?
So you have pharmacological treatments and non-pharmacological treatments for people who actually have this disorder. And people will use both at times too.
Well, I spoke to Dr. Diller earlier. Let's see, we have it here. Dr. Lawrence Diller, he's a behavioral and developmental pediatrician and author. He's written several books on the topic, the latest of which is called Remembering Ritalin. Now, when I spoke to Dr. Diller, I asked him if we're facing an epidemic with this and why. Let's take a listen.
Absolutely. And I ask, is this the most reasonable way to treat the normal variations in children's temperament and behavior? There are kids on the extreme. I want to be clear because I get accused of saying I'm anti-medicine and I'm absolutely not. There are kids on the extreme. I don't care who raised them, where you raised them, what country you were in. They would have problems and the medicine helps them. But that's a small minority.
I want to pull in our online community here for a second. I have a tweet here from Joseph. He says ADD is a real diagnosable illness and shouldn't be trivialized by people popping Adderall pills as a substitute for hard work. Frank, I want to pull you in. What would you agree with that comment, and tell us a little bit about your experience with Adderall?
Yeah, it's not about, for me or my kids, I don't think it's about trying to do well or become fit in. It's about being able to get clarity. And when you have ADHD, and my daughter and I once talked about the frustration, or talk about it all the time, about our frustration sometimes.
Okay, so we're having some sound issues. Let's pull out of that. I'd like to come back to you, Dr. Graff. Is there an ethical or moral issue with giving a child a prescription for something like Adderall so that they will simply do better in an academic setting?
Well, I think there are lots of ethical arguments here. You have to keep in mind that for adults who have full decision-making capacity, their own personal decision to take these drugs is respected. So based on the principles of independence and individual autonomy. With children, it's a little bit different because you have not just a doctor-child relationship, but you have a doctor-parent-child relationship. So you have the parents involved, and then obviously the children are still developing. There are a lot of other factors. The brain is still developing. There are social issues. There are fairness issues in our society. There are the issues about whether the child will want to take the drug and the parent wants it, or the parent wants it and the child, or some other combination. And then teenagers are going to be a little bit different than younger children in terms of the obligation we have to protect innocent populations or vulnerable populations.
I want to pull up on that point of ethics that you just touched upon. I have a tweet here from Idimo. He says, poor academic performance is not a disease, and taking pills to boost performance, in my opinion, is unethical and unhealthy. Sheila, I want to go to you. As a parent, what would you say the role of the government is in the larger use of this drug?
Well, I don't believe that the government should be endorsing attention deficit disorder. I think that the government's role is to support education, to teach life skills to children, and to inform parents of their rights, and that's informed consent, making sure that parents have all the information before they put their children on psychiatric drugs, such as the link to suicide ideation with the use of these drugs, and also making sure that they have alternatives that you know, if you don't believe in ADHD, because it's subjective, you know, you have a right to say, I don't want that for my child.
Well, let's go back to Dr. Diller. I asked him about the organizations and how they come to determine that prescription drugs are the right choice. Here, take a listen.
What these organizations have confused is the ends with the means. The ends with the means. Medicine works. There's no question about it. And in children, it's relatively safe, all right? But so do non-drug interventions, by essence, changing the hole that they have to fit in to shape that, to fit the shape a little bit more correctly, okay? What does that mean, really? It really means two things for the purely ADHD child, okay? It means teaching the parents and the schools more behavior mod type approaches, more immediacy of rewards and consequences, okay? And adjusting the whole educationally, whether the kid has a learning problem or giving him more, even if he needs to be given more. Those are the non-drug interventions that clearly work. They've been proven. Pills work too. They've been clearly proven too. What the organizations confuse is they make them a moral equivalent, and they're not.
So one of the other things Dr. Diller told me was he felt like the medical industry and doctors are incentivized to approach a problem like ADHD with medications because it's efficient, it's quick, it's easy, because prescription companies spend millions and millions of dollars advertising to doctors and building those relationships. And so the whole system is incentivized to deal with it through a pharmaceutical approach. As a doctor, do you agree with that?
I think that that's true. I think that it's been studied and discussed at multiple levels. It's hard to know in an individual family with an individual physician how much that's playing a role. I can't imagine it plays a role in my practice. But these are issues. Something has to explain why there are higher rates of these drug uses in the United States compared to other countries. That's one of the arguments.
I want to pull in our online community here for a second. I have a tweet here from Copito. He says, there's no such thing as a drug that makes you smarter. Only drugs that help you retain more info to become a test zombie. I also have a tweet here from Scott. He says, I distinguish between medicating bad grades and medicating an illness that begets bad grades. The first may have safer solutions. I want to pose this question to you, Aaron. Tell us a little bit about your experience with Adderall.
Well, I was diagnosed with ADHD in college, and I was put on Adderall. And you know, I found that it made work a lot easier. It was a lot more acceptable to sit down in class and you know, perform all the sort of like the mindless, repetitive problem sets, and just sort of being part of that institution and system made it significantly easier.
So, Dr. Graff, a college student comes to you like that and says, "This drug helps me perform better. Can I get a prescription for it?" Is that a justifiable reason to give them a prescription for it?
The Ethics, Law, and Humanities Committee of the American Academy of Neurology has addressed this problem. If a college student's over 18 and is adult, and he has full decision-making capacity, the physician has permissibility to prescribe that drug if that person wishes to try it. That doesn't mean the physician has to. There's a discussion that goes on, but the permissibility is there. So
the doctor can ethically give someone a prescription when they say, I just need it because I have finals coming up and it helps me.
In adults.
In adults, in college kids. One other thing I'd like to bring up with your particular practice is you're in New Haven, and most of our audience won't know much about New Haven, but they may recognize the fact that Yale University is there. And one of the things I know about New Haven, having been there a number of times, is one part of the town is fairly elite, highly educated, and the other part of the town is not. And the CDC has a fact on this where it shows that children of below the poverty line, families below the poverty line, are being prescribed the drug at a higher rate than children above the poverty line. And I'm curious if you see that dynamic in New Haven, and if so, why do you think that's happening?
It's interesting that you sort of say that. My practice is 70% Medicaid. I know the numbers, but I don't know who has what because I'm a salaried physician, so I see everybody the same.
Let's break that down for our international audience. So say your practice is 70% Medicaid. What that means is that a number of families in your practice do fall below the poverty line.
Right.
Right. Go ahead.
You can tell right away with the family what their cultural beliefs are and what their educational level. That doesn't appear on their insurance card. And you see people with different beliefs and different perspectives. There's a lot of discussion about whether ADHD is actually overdiagnosed or maybe even in some populations underdiagnosed. That doesn't mean people will automatically go on medication. They're just that there are a lot of overlaps and we call comorbidities with these types of disorders about why people can't function. They can't, there's a lot of learning disability involved, there's anxiety disorders which overlap, there's lots of other different factors. We've seen kids with epilepsy who are misdiagnosed as having ADHD, some rare neurological disorders, sleep disorders. So the physician has to be involved just to sort of get the story straight.
Well, okay, we have a response from our community, but I just want to get clear that families who are at or below the poverty line are being prescribed this at a higher rate, and I'm not sure I heard, do you have a theory on why that's the case?
I'm not so sure that that's true. I see...
Well, we have a CDC study. We can put this up on the screen for our viewers.
The rates have increased in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
But the problem has been that patients with insurance, with money, have been oftentimes more likely to get their children diagnosed and treated. It's been a reluctance of the lower classes to agree to diagnosis or even to give their children medication.
I see.
So perhaps our online community here for a second. I have a tweet from Sleepless in VA. I don't have kids, but I'd rather have them learn and fail naturally than to be medically enhanced with pharmaceuticals. So Sheila, I want to pose that comment to you. What would you have to say about that?
Well, first of all, I disagree with the doctor from Yale. The children in state care are getting prescribed drugs at a higher rate because Medicare is paying for it. So you have children under the age of 10 that are on 3 and 4 different psychiatric drugs that have not even been approved for use in children. So I would have to take issue with this doctor and say that the statistics show that clearly the children in foster care are being drugged against their will. They're trapped in the system. They do not have informed consent. The state has the informed consent. They hire out Yale University doctors who prescribe these drugs to the children.
Let's bring my conversation with Dr. Diller back in at this point. I also talked to him about why parents often opt out to medication instead of other forms of treatment. Take a look.
Parents and actually teachers value engagement, okay? Medical systems, doctors and drug companies, and educational systems value efficiency. So you get this big push from the industries to use medicine. Okay. And parents, not offered any choices besides no treatment or medicine, will opt for medicine.
You know, as a father, I have 4 children, 1 in college, and then the next oldest is in 1st grade, and then 2 younger than that. So I see it amongst my neighbors and how many children are being prescribed this with my younger son. And then my college son tells me that, oh yeah, you know, all my friends are using it. And I even read a blog from a law student who said she felt like she would be at a disadvantage if she didn't use these kind of drugs because it's almost like Lance Armstrong and doping to win the Tour de France. If everyone's doing it, if you want to win, you have to do it. At law school, if everyone is are doing these drugs, then you have to do it. Do you see that, this kind of competitive edge that people are looking for in these kind of drugs?
The studies aren't very clear. We hear a lot of anecdotal reports. Up to 25% of college students have tried it. I don't know how often they're using it. We've seen some data that show that they'll use it 4 times a month. Oftentimes Adderall. This is diversion drugs. These are drugs that are being sold illicitly, which is, by the way, a felony. Selling a controlled substance is not legal. People have to know that too. But they're out there, and there's a market for it. And people take it around exam times, we understand. And there might be some sort of a motivation for in this market. Again, getting back to the numbers, if you take populations, people will have some ADHD traits. These are relative traits. And you could even argue in some studies that up to 16-17% of the population has these traits, which is, again, a gray zone on the ADHD spectrum, as opposed to completely normal, healthy people who are taking it to get an edge in school, which is a different topic. That's called neuroenhancement. There's a different sort of label.
That's certainly one thing we want to focus on in this discussion is the idea of using these types of drugs for neuroenhancement, which I know a a lot of people in college do. I know a lot of people in our community are in college. So.
Exactly. It's almost like an arms race to overachieve. So Trent, I want to pose this question to you. Did you feel like you had to take these drugs to compete even harder when you were in college?
I didn't take Adderall until I was 29 years old, so that was almost 7 years out of college. I don't believe that it was necessary for anybody when I was in school, 2001, 2005, to get any sort of edge with Adderall. I knew people took it. It wasn't nearly as widespread then as it is now. I just sort of heard this term of an arms race building up in college with illegal or legal stimulants. And that sort of scares me now that I hear about it in that terminology. An arms race does seem like something that can kind of build up upon itself and make people artificially unaware of what they can do naturally, which is, I think, super unhealthy. And if you go to extreme with these drugs, which people often do in college, you can really hurt yourself. And I think that if you're not given the proper education about how to use it properly and balance your life, your Adderall life, as you want to call it, with your regular life, then you're going to be in big trouble.
I'd like to back away and talk about the larger system. I think the environment is a big part of this. So if you're looking at schools where families below the poverty rate especially, their children are on government plans, they go to school and they get the government breakfast and meals. The government breakfast often at the school is French toast with syrup on top. There's a vending machine with Cokes there for lunch. I'm wondering how much the broader environment, when you give young kids, especially boys, and boys are being given these drugs at a greater frequency than girls, when you give them a bunch of sugar and then you put them in an environment where they're supposed to sit still for 50 minutes at a time, are you setting it up for these kind of diagnoses? Are you setting the kids up for failure?
So people have looked at this in association studies. Nutrition, sleep, environmental factors, television time has been studied. These are all factors that play a role. There seems to be a difference between those people who actually have ADHD and then these other factors. There's one study that showed zinc levels were slightly lower, or omega-3 levels were slightly lower in a general population. One French study showed that ferritin levels were slightly lower, but generally people have to eat some food. There's good food and bad food. We like fruits and vegetables a lot, and you're probably giving that to your children. Not everybody can afford good food. That's a problem. And then the question is, does that bad food cause ADHD or not? There's not a lot of evidence to support that.
So take a family like me where I'm probably feeding my children at home. They're not on the government meals, right? But I moved to this neighborhood because it has a good school, as did every other family in my neighborhood. So now you have a school full of kids where they all have to be above average. But half of those kids have to be below average for there to actually be an average, right? Like Wobegon, I think he wrote that all the kids in town were above average. And that can't be the case. So you have families that are competitive and they feel like they need to give their kids these kind of drugs so that they do better. And you have families that are perhaps below the poverty line that see this as their way out, that their kid needs to do better in school because this is how their kid's going to get into college. I imagine someone like Frank, who your daughter is on Adderall, I believe, right?
No, I am. She takes long-release Ritalin in the morning after breakfast. I take Adderall. She's a junior in high school. She is also dyslexic and has some other learning disabilities. And
how has the Adderall affected her academic performance?
Well, she takes Ritalin, long-acting. It's not how I guess she's doing okay. She's doing B's and stuff, but she's had a sense for a while. But it's not that we took it to boost her academic performance. She and I identified with her strongly. She voiced so much frustration and anger because you get confused, you get overcome with the input, and you can't. The focusing is impossible, and your social things are off. I led to so many problems in my life, and I was so glad when I finally was prescribed, and I went through a lot of therapy and worked on it. And we also do all the other things people say. You know, we work with her, we work on the diet, we work with her
Hey, Frank, I'm going to stop you there because we're coming to the end of the show. But clearly, I think these drugs do help some, like yourself, your daughter. I think, as you're pointing out, the environment's a part of it. I want to thank all of our guests today, Dr. Graff, Dr. Diller, everyone in our Google Plus Hangout. Remember, you can follow all of our stories and watch previous episodes of this at stream.aljazeera.com. And as always, we'll see you online.